The flash of a camera can capture a moment, but tonight it would detonate a life. In the gilded ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel, where New York's elite gathered to trade pleasantries and seven-figure donations, a lie was about to be told on a stage flooded with light. Julian Sterling, a titan of industry, stood with a smile as dazzling as the chandelier above him. But the woman on his arm was not his wife. His real wife, Amelia, 8 months pregnant with their first child, was supposed to be at home. But she wasn't. And what she did next would not only expose a devastating betrayal, but would ignite a battle for a billion-dollar empire in front of the entire world. The air in the Sterling's penthouse on Park Avenue was always still a carefully curated silence that cost a fortune to maintain. From their 70th-floor perch, the chaotic symphony of New York City was reduced to a muted, glittering tapestry. For Amelia Sterling, this silence had once felt like peace. Now it felt like a vacuum, sucking the very air from her lungs. She ran a hand over the gentle, taut swell of her belly. 8 months. In 8 months, she had gone from being the happiest woman in the world to a ghost in her own home. The baby, a boy they had already named Leo, was a constant tumbling reminder of a dream that was curdling into a nightmare. Amelia wasn't born into this world of silent penthouses and bespoke couture. She had met Julian Sterling when they were both nobodies with outsized ambitions at Columbia. She was the brilliant, meticulous business student who saw potential in his chaotic genius for software architecture. It was her business plan that secured their first round of seed funding for Sterling Innovations. Her strategies that navigated them through 2 recessions. She wasn't just the woman behind the man. She was the architect of the platform he stood upon. For 12 years, they were an unbreakable team. He was the face, the charismatic visionary. She was the strategist, the steady hand, the one who transformed his wild ideas into profitable realities. They built an empire worth billions, and she had never once doubted their foundation. The cracks began as hairline fractures almost invisible. It started 6 months ago. Late nights at the office became more frequent, explained away by a critical new product launch. Business trips to Singapore and Zurich were extended with little notice. The physical distance was one thing, but the emotional chasm was what truly terrified her. The easy laughter they once shared over dinner was replaced by the polite, stilted conversation of strangers. The way he looked at her had changed. The adoration was gone, replaced by a distracted, almost clinical assessment. He blamed it on the stress of the company and the impending responsibility of fatherhood. "I just need to close this last deal, Amy," he'd murmur, kissing her forehead without meeting her eyes. "Then it's just you and me and Leo. I promise." Amelia, ever the pragmatist, tried to believe him. She focused on the nursery, on picking out tiny onesies, and reading books on motherhood. She told herself this was a phase, a temporary storm before the calm of their new life as a family. But a woman knows. She knows in the shift of a tone, the scent of a strange perfume on a suit jacket that came back from the dry cleaners too quickly, the phone that was suddenly always angled away from her. The name she overheard in a hushed, angry phone call Julian took in his study was Isabella. It was spoken with a frustrated intimacy that twisted a knife in Amelia's gut. Tonight was the Sterling Foundation's annual charity gala, the pinnacle of their philanthropic efforts, and the jewel in their social crown. For years, Amelia had been the heart of the foundation, personally overseeing its projects, supporting underprivileged students in STEM. It was her passion. This year, however, Julian had been insistent she not attend. "You're 8 months pregnant, darling," he had said 2 nights ago. His voice slick with a manufactured concern that made her skin crawl. "You need to rest. The stress, the crowds. It's too much. I'll handle everything. I'll make a speech and tell everyone you send your love." She had looked at him, then truly looked at him, and saw the lie swimming in the depths of his cool blue eyes. He didn't want her there. It wasn't about her health. It was about her presence. "But Julian, it's my project," she protested weakly. "The scholarship recipients will be there. I wanted to meet them." "Next year," he'd said with an air of finality, already turning away to adjust his tie. "I need to be at my best tonight, Amy. A lot is riding on this. Don't make it difficult." The dismissal was as sharp as a slap. She was being hidden, erased. Now, standing in their cavernous walk-in closet, she looked at the gown she had planned to wear. A custom-made seraphine gown in deep sapphire silk, designed to celebrate her pregnancy, not hide it. On the other side of the closet hung Julian's tuxedo, perfectly pressed and ready. He had left an hour ago, his last words a perfunctory, "Get some rest. I'll be late." A cold, hard certainty began to crystallize in her heart, displacing the fog of doubt and fear. She was not a fool to be managed or a patient to be placated. She was Amelia Sterling, the co-architect of an empire, and she would not be erased from her own life. She picked up her phone, her fingers moving with a newfound resolve. The first call was to her driver, Miguel, a man who had been with her for a decade and whose loyalty was unquestionable. "Miguel," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Please have the car ready in 20 minutes. I've decided to attend the gala after all." The second call was to a number she hadn't dialed in years, but one she had kept for a reason she never wanted to admit to herself. It was to Clara Hayes, a notoriously sharp litigator who had been 2 years ahead of her at Columbia Law, long before Amelia had dropped out to build the company with Julian. Clara was known as the Velvet Hammer, soft-spoken, elegant, and absolutely lethal in a negotiation or a courtroom. "Clara," Amelia said when the lawyer answered, "it's Amelia Sterling. I need you. I think my husband is about to do something catastrophic, and I need you to be ready." Clara's voice was calm, devoid of surprise. "Send me the details. I'm always ready." As Amelia put on the sapphire gown, she didn't feel like a victim. The pain was still there, a hot, searing agony in her chest, but it was now fueling something else, a cold, righteous fury. Julian had underestimated her. He had mistaken her love for weakness, her partnership for dependence. He had forgotten who she was. Tonight, at his grandest celebration on his biggest stage, she would remind him. The drive to the St. Regis was a surreal journey through a city that sparkled with indifference. Each streetlight that washed over Amelia's face in the back of the Maybach felt like a slow-motion strobe light, illuminating the fractures in her perfect life. Miguel, sensing the gravity of the evening, drove in absolute silence, his eyes meeting hers only once in the rearview mirror, with a look of quiet, unwavering support. Amelia clutched her small evening bag, her knuckles white. Inside was her phone, a copy of her marriage certificate, and a single folded document that she prayed she would not have to use, but which Clara had insisted she bring. It was a copy of the original Sterling Innovations partnership agreement, the one they'd signed on a cheap diner table 12 years ago, the one that predated the layers of corporate structuring and prenuptial agreements Julian's lawyers had since built around them. She had instructed Miguel to use the service entrance to avoid the spectacle of the red carpet. She didn't want to be seen. Not yet. The element of surprise was her only weapon in a war she was just beginning to understand she was fighting. A sympathetic hotel manager, a woman Amelia had worked with on numerous foundation events, ushered her through the labyrinthine corridors of the hotel's back of house. The distant sound of the orchestra grew louder, with every step the muffled bass thumping like a second anxious heartbeat against her own. "Are you all right, Mrs. Sterling?" the manager asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "We weren't expecting you." "I'm fine, Maria. Thank you," Amelia replied, forcing a serene smile. "I just wanted to make a quiet entrance." Maria led her to a small alcove just off the main ballroom, shielded by a large floral arrangement. From here, Amelia had a clear, unobstructed view of the stage and the sea of tables filled with the city's most powerful figures. The room was breathtaking, a kaleidoscope of glittering gowns, flashing diamonds, and the self-satisfied smiles of the 1%. And there at the center of it all was Julian. He was working the room, moving from table to table, with the effortless charm that had always been his greatest asset. He looked magnificent in his Tom Ford tuxedo, a king in his court. But he wasn't alone. Clinging to his arm was a woman Amelia had never seen in person, but whose face she had glimpsed in blurry, long-lens photos sent by a private investigator she'd hired 2 weeks ago. Isabella Vance. She was stunning in a way that was both intimidating and impossibly generic. Long raven hair, impossibly high cheekbones, and a red dress that seemed poured onto her statuesque frame. She looked up at Julian with an expression of pure adoration, an expression Amelia herself had worn for over a decade. A wave of nausea, hot and acidic, rose in Amelia's throat. It was one thing to suspect, to see grainy photos. It was another to witness it here in their world at their event. It was a desecration. She watched as Julian laughed, touching Isabella's back with a possessive familiarity that made Amelia's breath catch in her chest. The people at the tables, their friends, their business partners, people who had been to their home for dinner, smiled and chatted with the couple, seemingly unfazed. A chilling realization dawned on Amelia. This wasn't new to them. The rumors must have been circulating for months. She was the last to know. The clueless, pregnant wife kept safely at home while her husband paraded his replacement. The master of ceremonies, a well-known news anchor, took to the stage. "And now," his booming voice echoed through the ballroom, "it is my distinct honor to welcome the man of the hour, the visionary founder of Sterling Innovations, and the generous heart behind the Sterling Foundation, Mr. Julian Sterling." A wave of applause swept the room. Julian, beaming, led Isabella by the hand toward the stage. He helped her up the small set of stairs with a tenderness that was like a physical blow to Amelia. They stood together at the podium, a perfect, gleaming power couple. The spotlight caught the massive diamond on Isabella's left hand, and Amelia felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. It wasn't just an affair. It was a replacement. Julian tapped the microphone, the sound reverberating through the silent, expectant room. "Thank you, David. Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice smooth as velvet. "Your generosity continues to astound me and allows the foundation to do its vital work. This has been a year of tremendous growth for Sterling Innovations, and a year of profound personal change for me." He paused, turning to look at Isabella, his eyes filled with a scripted public devotion. He took her hand in his. "Many of you have known me for years, and you've known the support I've had beside me. But life is about evolution, about embracing new chapters, and I am overjoyed to begin my next chapter with the most incredible woman I have ever known." He lifted her hand to his lips. The cameras at the foot of the stage flashed in a frenzy. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. "Don't say it, Julian. Please, for the love of God, don't." But he did. "I want to thank you all for coming," he continued, his voice ringing with triumph. "And I want you all to join me in celebrating the future. Please, a round of applause for my beautiful wife, Amelia Sterling." The name hit the room like a sonic boom. For a split second, there was a stunned silence, a collective intake of breath, as hundreds of people processed the public execution they had just witnessed. Amelia felt the air leave her body, her vision narrowing to a pinpoint focused on the two figures bathed in light on the stage. Amelia Sterling. He had given her Amelia's name. Then, confused but polite, the applause began to ripple through the room. It was hesitant at first, then grew stronger as people followed the social cue. They were clapping for her replacement. They were applauding the erasure of Amelia Sterling. In her shielded alcove, Amelia leaned against the cold marble wall, one hand protectively on her stomach, where Leo gave a sudden violent kick as if sensing his mother's agony. The sound of the applause, the flash of the cameras, the smiling face of her husband beside his new wife. It all merged into a vortex of betrayal, so profound it felt like it could tear her apart. But it didn't. As the applause died down and Julian began his prepared speech about philanthropy, something inside Amelia snapped. The part of her that was grieving, that was heartbroken, that was humiliated, went silent. And in its place a cold, diamond-hard clarity emerged. He had not just left her. He had not just cheated on her. He had attempted to publicly annihilate her, to rewrite their entire history in front of the world that she had helped build. He thought she was a chapter he could close. He was wrong. She was the whole damn book. Amelia pushed herself off the wall. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with a fire that could have melted steel. She looked at Maria, the hotel manager who was staring at her with wide, horrified eyes. "Maria." Amelia's voice was quiet, but it held a new, chilling authority. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to get a message to the head of security. Tell him that the real Mrs. Sterling is here, and she is about to go on stage." While Julian's voice droned on from the stage, weaving a hypocritical tapestry of words about integrity and community. Amelia's mind was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. The initial shock had passed, leaving behind the icy calm that precedes a hurricane. She was no longer a wife betrayed. She was a general surveying a battlefield, calculating her next move. She found a deserted powder room, the opulent marble and gold, a stark contrast to the ugliness of her reality. Staring at her reflection, she saw the faint smudges of tears under her eyes, but also a glint of steel that hadn't been there an hour ago. She was the majority partner in their initial venture, a fact Julian had conveniently forgotten, burying it under years of complex corporate filings. He thought the prenup was his shield, but he'd forgotten about the foundation upon which the entire house was built. Her phone buzzed. It was Clara Hayes. "I'm watching the live stream," Clara said, her voice devoid of emotion. "He actually did it. The unmitigated gall of that man." "He did," Amelia breathed, steadying herself against a vanity. "He called her Amelia Sterling. That's not just infidelity, Amelia. That's a public declaration. It's a calculated move to delegitimize you. In legal terms, it's a gift. A very, very expensive gift he just handed you." Amelia recalled the clause Clara had been referring to when they'd last spoken. Years ago, when they were formalizing their prenuptial agreement, Julian's lawyers had drafted a document that was overwhelmingly in his favor. It protected his assets, his company, shares, everything. But Amelia, guided by a flicker of premonition she couldn't explain at the time, had insisted on a single, non-negotiable addition. With the help of a young but brilliant lawyer, Clara, she had crafted the public image and fidelity clause. It was an unusual clause, one Julian had laughed at, calling it her romantic nonsense. It stipulated that their partnership was not just financial, but also one of public trust, essential to the brand of Sterling Innovations. It stated that in the event of a public act of infidelity, so egregious that it brought the company and the family name into disrepute, causing demonstrable harm to the brand's image of stability and integrity, a penalty would be enacted. The penalty was draconian. It would trigger an immediate and irrevocable transfer of 30% of Julian's voting shares in Sterling Innovations to Amelia. Combined with the 25% she already owned outright from her foundational role, this would give her a controlling 55% majority. It would make her the master of their universe. At the time, Julian had signed it without a second thought, smugly secure in his ability to be discreet. "Don't worry, Amy," he had chuckled. "I'm not an idiot." "He is an idiot, Clara," Amelia whispered into the phone, a grim smile touching her lips for the first time that night. "He's an arrogant, spectacular idiot." "Arrogance is the best weapon a litigator can hope for in an opponent," Clara replied. "Now listen to me carefully. The clause is ironclad, but he will fight it. He will try to bury us in litigation for years. The key is to act now, while the narrative is white hot. You have a captive audience of the most influential people in the city, and the press is right there. You cannot let him leave that stage and start spinning his version of the story." "What do I do?" Amelia asked, her heart beginning to pound again, this time with adrenaline, not fear. "You don't hide. You don't release a statement tomorrow. You walk out on that stage right now. You take the microphone and you claim what is yours. You be calm. You be factual. You be the CEO, not the scorned wife. Remind them who you are. Remind him who you are." "Can you do that?" Amelia took a deep breath, the air filling her with a cold fire. She thought of her son Leo sleeping soundly in her womb, his future hanging in the balance. She thought of the 12 years of her life she had poured into building their dream, a dream Julian was now trying to steal. "Yes," she said, her voice resonating with newfound power. "I can do that." "Good. I'm already on my way to the hotel. I've also taken the liberty of contacting Arthur Finch and 2 other board members who are in attendance tonight. I sent them a copy of the clause. They know what's at stake. You won't be entirely alone." Arthur Finch. He was the company's first major investor, a mentor to them both in the early days, and the closest thing the board had to a conscience. He was old school, a man for whom loyalty and honor were paramount. If Arthur was on her side, the battle was half won. "Thank you, Clara," Amelia said, emotion finally cracking her voice. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Go and win the war." Amelia hung up. She took one last look in the mirror, straightened the lines of her sapphire gown, and placed a hand on her belly, a silent promise to her son. "I will not let him break us. This family, this company is ours." She exited the powder room and walked back towards the ballroom, her heels clicking on the polished marble floors. The sound was no longer hesitant. Each step was deliberate, measured, and purposeful. Each click was a countdown to the moment the world and her husband would finally learn that Amelia Sterling was not a victim to be pitied, but a queen coming to reclaim her throne. The storm was no longer gathering. It was about to break. On stage, Julian Sterling was at the apex of his power. The warmth of the spotlight felt like a benediction. The attentive faces in the crowd, a reflection of his own greatness. He had done it. He had seamlessly executed the most audacious social maneuver of his life. The initial brief hesitation in the applause had been quickly swallowed by the force of his confidence. People adapted. They always did. Isabella stood beside him, a vision in crimson, her hand resting delicately in the crook of his arm. She was perfect. She was young, vibrant, and looked at him as if he were a god. She didn't challenge him. She didn't question his late nights. She didn't have the weary familiarity that had begun to grate on him with Amelia. Isabella was a beautiful blank canvas on which he could paint his next chapter. He finished his speech with a flourish, announcing a surprise $5 million personal donation to the foundation, a move designed to cement his image as a benevolent leader. The applause was thunderous this time, genuine. He felt a surge of pure, unadulterated triumph. As he and Isabella descended the stage, they were immediately swarmed by well-wishers. "Julian, congratulations! She's stunning," said Marcus Thorne, a hedge fund billionaire with a notorious reputation for trading in wives like stocks. "A bold move, Sterling. I like it," commented another, a grizzled real estate magnate. Julian accepted the praise with a magnanimous smile, telling a carefully rehearsed story. "It was all very sudden, but when you know, he'd say with a shrug. "Amelia and I separated amicably some time ago. We wanted to keep it private for the sake of the family, but it was time to move forward." It was a plausible lie, cushioned by the unspoken rule of their social circle. Don't ask too many questions, especially when the answer might be uncomfortable. Isabella played her part beautifully, offering shy smiles and murmured thanks. The picture of a woman gracefully stepping into a role she was born to play. But not everyone was convinced. He noticed a few of the older, more established couples people who had known him and Amelia since the beginning, offering curt, tight-lipped congratulations before quickly moving away. He saw whispers exchanged behind champagne flutes, questioning glances shot in his direction. He dismissed it as envy. His phone vibrated in his pocket. It was a text from his chief communications officer. "Press is going wild. We need to release a formal statement ASAP, clarifying your marital status. Things could get messy." Julian texted back. "Draft something about an amicable divorce. I'll approve it in the morning. Control the narrative." He felt invincible, the master of his own story. The messiness was a small price to pay for the freedom he had just bought himself. Amelia would be hurt, of course, but she was a pragmatist. She would see the futility of a fight. Their prenup was a fortress. She'd get a generous settlement, the penthouse enough, to live a quiet, comfortable life out of the spotlight. It was a clean, surgical cut. Then he saw Arthur Finch making his way through the crowd toward him. Arthur, a man in his late 70s with a ramrod posture and eyes that had seen the rise and fall of countless Wall Street titans, was the one person whose opinion Julian genuinely valued. "Arthur, so glad you could make it," Julian said, extending a hand. Arthur ignored the hand. His face was a thundercloud of disapproval. He looked from Julian to Isabella, his gaze lingering on her with undisguised contempt, before settling back on Julian. "What have you done, son?" Arthur's voice was low, a gravelly rumble of disappointment. Julian's smile tightened. "Arthur, it's a long story. Amelia and I—" "Save it." Arthur cut him off. "I had dinner with you and Amelia at your home 3 weeks ago. You kissed your pregnant wife goodbye and told her you loved her. Amicable separation is a lie that insults my intelligence and her honor. Julian felt a flicker of annoyance. This is a private matter. You made it a public matter the moment you put that woman on your stage and gave her your wife's name, Arthur retorted, his voice dangerously quiet. You built Sterling Innovations on a reputation of stability, of long-term vision of trust, and you just lit a match to it for a cheap thrill. This isn't just a private matter, Julian. It's a corporate governance issue. You've introduced a massive liability into the company, and you did it with a microphone and a spotlight. Before Julian could formulate a response, Arthur's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his eyes widening slightly. It was an email from Clara Hayes. He read it quickly, his expression shifting from anger to stunned disbelief. He looked up at Julian, a new chilling light in his eyes. "You fool," Arthur whispered the words, carrying more weight than any shout. "You catastrophic fool! You have no idea what you've just unleashed!" Arthur turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Julian standing there, a seed of doubt finally penetrating his armor of arrogance. What did Arthur mean? What could Amelia possibly do? The prenup was airtight. He held all the cards. At that moment, a subtle shift occurred in the atmosphere of the ballroom. The buzz of conversation began to die down, replaced by a wave of murmurs. Heads started to turn not towards him, but towards the grand entrance. A path was clearing in the crowd, people stepping back as if for royalty. Julian followed their gaze, and his blood ran cold. There, walking slowly and deliberately through the parted sea of New York's elite, was Amelia. She was radiant, a vision in sapphire. Her pregnancy, not a weakness to be hidden, but a proud declaration. Her face was serene, her eyes fixed on the stage. She wasn't weeping. She wasn't hysterical. She looked like a queen who had come to address a rebellion in her court. Julian's triumph evaporated, replaced by a sudden sickening dread. This was not the quiet, pragmatic Amelia who would accept a settlement. This was the Amelia he hadn't seen in years. This was the brilliant, ruthless strategist who had once stared down venture capitalists and hostile board members and made them bend to her will. Isabella sensed the change immediately. "Julian." "Who is that?" she whispered, her grip on his arm tightening. "What's happening?" Julian couldn't answer. He could only watch as his wife, the one he had so carelessly discarded, walked towards the stage, towards the microphone, and towards the complete and utter destruction of the world he had just built. The king on his cardboard throne was about to face the woman who owned the castle. Amelia moved through the ballroom with a grace that defied the weight of her body and the gravity of her purpose. The whispers followed her like the train of a gown, a ripple of shock and speculation. "Is that? I thought she was ill. My God, she's pregnant." She ignored them all. Her focus was a laser beam locked on the stage at the front of the room. It was her stage. She had overseen the design, chosen the flowers, approved the lighting. Tonight it had been used as a platform for her public humiliation. Now it would be her pedestal for reclamation. As she approached the front, she could see Julian's face pale under the warm stage lights. The smug confidence had vanished, replaced by a mask of disbelief and burgeoning panic. The woman beside him, Isabella, looked utterly lost, her beauty dissolving into confusion as the attention of 1,000 powerful people shifted from her to the approaching pregnant woman. 2 security guards, large men in black suits, moved to intercept her at the bottom of the stairs to the stage. They had clearly been given instructions. "Ma'am, I'm sorry you can't go up there," the first guard said, holding out a placating hand. Amelia didn't break her stride. She looked him directly in the eye, her voice calm and imbued with an authority that was absolute. "My name is Amelia Sterling. This is my foundation's event, and that is my husband on that stage. Take your hand off my path." The guard faltered. He looked back at his partner, then towards the stage where Julian was frozen, offering no direction. In that moment of hesitation, Arthur Finch stepped forward, his aged but powerful presence instantly changing the dynamic. "Let her pass," Arthur commanded the guards. "She is exactly where she needs to be." The guards, recognizing a power greater than their immediate orders, stepped aside. Amelia gave Arthur a brief, grateful nod and ascended the 3 steps to the stage. The silence in the ballroom was now absolute. It was a heavy, profound silence, filled with the delicious, terrifying anticipation of a scandal unfolding in real time. Every phone was out, every camera recording. This was a moment that would be replayed and dissected for weeks to come. Amelia walked directly to the podium, where Julian and Isabella stood like statues. She didn't look at Isabella. She refused to give the woman the dignity of her acknowledgement. Instead, her eyes locked with Julian's. In their depths, she saw it all, the shock, the fear, and finally the dawning, horrifying realization that he had made a fatal miscalculation. "Amelia," he stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper that the microphone picked up and amplified throughout the silent room. "What are you doing here? You should be at home." "I was," Amelia replied, her voice steady and clear, a stark contrast to his. "But I felt I was missing something important." She turned her attention from him to the microphone. She adjusted it slightly, a simple, deliberate gesture of someone taking control. She placed one hand on the podium and the other on her swollen belly, a powerful maternal image of both creation and destruction. She looked out at the audience, at the sea of stunned, curious faces. She saw the news anchor who had introduced Julian, his mouth agape. She saw the board members Clara had contacted, their expressions grim and resolute. She saw it all, and she felt no fear. "Good evening," she began, her voice ringing through the cavernous space, not with the hysteria of a wronged wife, but with the cool, measured tone of a CEO addressing her shareholders. "Many of you seem to be under some confusion, so I felt it was my duty to come here tonight and provide some clarity." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "My husband, Julian Sterling, was correct when he said this has been a year of profound change. He just neglected to share the full story." She turned her head slowly, her gaze falling upon Julian like a physical weight. "A few moments ago, my husband introduced you to Miss Isabella Vance. She made a point of using the correct name, a subtle but devastating correction, as his wife. This must have been quite a surprise to many of you, as it was to me, considering I am Amelia Sterling, his actual and legal wife, and the mother of his unborn son." A collective gasp went through the room. It was a physical sound, a wave of shock and outrage. The narrative Julian had tried to control was shattering before his eyes. He had cast himself as the romantic lead in a new story. Amelia was recasting him as the villain in a tragedy of his own making. This was her opening move in a game of chess he didn't even know they were playing. The Queen's gambit had been deployed, and the King was in check. The ballroom was a tinderbox, and Amelia had just struck the match. The gasp from the crowd was followed by an explosion of frantic murmurs. On stage, Julian's face had turned a ghastly shade of white. Isabella looked as if she wanted the floor to swallow her whole, her fantasy of a glamorous new life crumbling into a public nightmare. Amelia held up a hand, and an almost impossible silence fell once more. They were hers now. The entire room, the entire city was hanging on her next word. I understand that private matters are seldom meant for public stages, she continued, her voice resonating with a powerful, almost sorrowful dignity. But my husband, in his enthusiasm, to begin his new chapter, chose this stage. He chose to involve all of you. Therefore, I am forced to respond on this stage. She let her gaze sweep across the front rows, where the most influential board members and investors of Sterling Innovations sat, their faces etched with shock and dawning fury. They were not just seeing a marital dispute, they were witnessing a catastrophic failure of judgment from their CEO. Julian and I are bound by more than just a marriage certificate, Amelia stated, her tone shifting from personal revelation to hard-nosed business. We are bound by a partnership that began 12 years ago when Sterling Innovations was just an idea sketched on a napkin. We are bound by contracts and agreements that formed the very bedrock of our company. Contracts, it seems, my husband has forgotten. Julian finally found his voice a strangled, desperate sound. Amelia, this is not the time or the place. We can discuss this at home. There is no home for us to discuss this in any more, Julian, she replied, her voice cutting through the air like glass, not turning to look at him. You made that clear, and this is precisely the time and the place, because this is no longer just about your infidelity. It is about your profound unsuitability to lead the company we built together. She turned slightly, addressing the board members directly. Gentlemen, many of you will be aware of the prenuptial agreement Julian and I signed, but you may be less aware of a specific provision I insisted upon, Clause 7b, the Public Image and Fidelity Clause. A low murmur went through the section where the board members sat. Arthur Finch nodded grimly. Clara Hayes, who had just slipped into the back of the ballroom, allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. The clause is quite specific, Amelia explained, her voice as sharp and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. It states that should one partner engage in a public act of infidelity so flagrant as to cause demonstrable damage to the reputation and stability of the Sterling brand, a severe and immediate penalty is triggered. I would argue that introducing your mistress as your wife at your own foundation's gala in front of the world's media, while your 8 months pregnant wife is at home, qualifies as flagrant. Laughter, sharp and humorless, rippled through parts of the crowd. The tide of public opinion, a force Julian had always masterfully manipulated, was turning against him with the ferocity of a tsunami. And the penalty, Amelia continued, her voice dropping for dramatic effect, is the immediate, non-negotiable transfer of 30% of Julian's voting shares in Sterling Innovations to my name. The silence that followed was different. It was the sound of a billion-dollar bombshell detonating. Jaws dropped. Financial reporters in the audience were already typing furiously into their phones. Julian stared at her, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. He looked like a man who had just been shot and was only now realizing the blood pouring from his chest was his own. He had forgotten. In his colossal arrogance, he had completely forgotten about the romantic nonsense clause he had signed years ago. Amelia let the impact of her words sink in before delivering the final devastating blow. Combined with my existing 25% stake as a founding partner, she announced, her voice ringing with the authority of her newfound power. As of this moment, I am the majority shareholder of Sterling Innovations with a controlling interest of 55%. It was done. It was a coup executed with breathtaking precision in the heart of the enemy's camp. She turned to Julian, her eyes no longer holding pain, only a cold, dispassionate finality. "So you see, Julian, you will have your new chapter. You are free to be with Miss Vance. But the company, the empire we built, remains with the family. With me. And with our son." She then turned back to the stunned audience. "The Sterling Foundation will also be entering a new chapter. Effective immediately, its primary mission will be redirected. A new fund will be established, endowed with the $10 million that were pledged here tonight, dedicated entirely to providing financial, legal, and emotional support to women and single mothers who have been abandoned in circumstances like my own." A wave of applause started tentative at first, then swelling into a roar. It was led by the women in the room, a spontaneous, powerful expression of solidarity that shook the very foundations of the ballroom. They were clapping for her courage, for her brilliance, for her righteous fury. Amelia looked at her husband one last time. He was a broken man, stripped of his power, his reputation, and his empire in the space of 5 minutes. Isabella was already backing away from him, her face a picture of terror as she realized she had hitched her star to a falling meteor. Amelia Sterling did not feel a shred of pity. She simply took a deep, cleansing breath, turned away from the wreckage of her marriage, and walked off the stage. Not as a wife, but as the undisputed queen of Sterling innovations. The roar of applause that had sealed her victory felt distant to Amelia as she walked away from the stage. It was as if she were moving through water, the sounds of the world muted and distorted. She didn't look back at the tableau of destruction she had wrought at Julian, a statue of ash, or Isabella, a ghost in a red dress. Her entire being was focused on a single objective: getting out. Miguel was waiting just beyond the ballroom doors, his large, comforting presence a bulwark against the chaos. He took one look at her face, pale but resolute, and simply nodded, placing a steadying hand on her elbow to guide her through the hotel's service corridors. The hotel manager, Maria, met them with a cashmere wrap, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and awe. "Your car is waiting, Mrs. Sterling, darling," she whispered, the title now holding an undisputed weight. As they stepped into the cool night air, the adrenaline that had fueled Amelia's defiant stand began to recede, leaving a hollow, trembling exhaustion in its wake. The reality of what she had done, what she had lost, crashed down on her. She had won the war, but the battlefield was the ruins of her life, her love, her family. As she sank into the plush leather of the Maybach, the first sob escaped her, a ragged, guttural sound of 12 years of love and partnership dying. Miguel pulled away from the curb, just as a figure darted towards the car. It was Clara Hayes, her chic coat thrown over her evening dress, her face illuminated by the streetlights. She tapped on the window, and Amelia buzzed it down. "Don't go home," Clara said, her voice urgent but calm. "His lawyers will try to serve you. His sycophants will try to call you. The press will be camped outside the building by morning. I've booked you the presidential suite at the Mandarin Oriental under a corporate name. Go there. I'll handle everything on the ground here and meet you in an hour." Amelia could only nod, the tears now streaming silently down her face. "Clara, thank you." "We're not done yet," Clara said, a grim smile on her face. "This was just the declaration of war. Now we win it." Back in the St. Regis ballroom, chaos reigned. As Amelia disappeared, the spell of silence broke, and the room erupted. Julian stood frozen for a moment longer, a man publicly executed before he turned on Isabella. His face contorted in a mask of pure rage. "You," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "This is your fault." Isabella, terrified, stumbled back. "My fault. You told me she was a non-issue," she cried, her voice rising in panic. The cameras, which had never stopped flashing, captured her desperate accusatory expression. Realizing her position, she turned and fled the stage, pushing through the stunned crowd, her glamorous entrance a world away from this humiliating, frantic exit. She would be on a plane to an undisclosed location by sunrise, her 15 minutes of infamy already curdling into a lifetime of regret. Julian was immediately swarmed, not by well-wishers, but by the press shouting questions like machine gun fire. "Mr. Sterling, is the fidelity clause real? What is your response to the allegation? Will you be stepping down as CEO?" He was buffeted, lost his charm and power, utterly useless. It was Arthur Finch who finally broke through the cordon, his face a mask of cold fury. "That's enough," he boomed, his voice carrying the authority of old money and unimpeachable integrity. He grabbed Julian's arm. "You will come with me now. You will not speak another word to anyone." He dragged a dazed and broken Julian from the ballroom, not as a friend, but as a board member containing a toxic asset. The dawn broke over a city obsessed. The story was on every news channel, every website, every blog. The New York Post ran a full-page photo of Amelia on stage with the headline, "The CEO Mama." The Wall Street Journal took a more measured but no less devastating approach. "Sterling Innovations in crisis as founder's personal life implodes. Board scrambles to address shareholder concerns." On social media, #Sterling. Staging and #Amelia's Gambit were trending globally. Memes were already circulating Julian's horrified face, captioned with "Finds out his prenup has a clause 7B." The public verdict was instantaneous and universal. Amelia was a hero, a corporate queen, a wronged woman who had claimed her power with breathtaking style. Julian was a villain, a fool, a textbook example of arrogant self-destruction. In the serene quiet of the hotel suite, Amelia, Clara, and Arthur Finch planned their next moves. Clara had been on the phone all night, leveraging the board's panic. "The emergency vote is scheduled for 6 a.m., Clara reported, sipping a much-needed coffee. "Arthur has already secured the proxies. They're terrified of a market collapse. They'll vote you in as interim CEO, Amelia. It's the only move that signals stability." "And Julian?" Amelia asked, her voice quiet. She was dressed in a hotel robe, her magnificent gown now lying in a sapphire heap on a chair. "He's been sequestered with his legal team," Arthur answered, his tone grim. "They're talking about challenging the clause, claiming duress, emotional distress, anything they can think of. It will be a nasty public fight." "Let them," Clara said with a sharp smile. "Discovery will be a nightmare for him. We'll subpoena every text message, every credit card statement, every hotel receipt. The more he fights, the dirtier he looks, and the more the company's value will be tied to you, Amelia, as the only viable leader." The board meeting was a formality. The vote was unanimous. At 10 a.m., Clara Hayes, flanked by Arthur, held a press conference. She didn't just confirm the story, she framed it. She spoke of Amelia's foundational role in the company, her strategic brilliance, and her unwavering dedication. She announced Amelia's appointment as CEO and laid out a clear, confident vision for the future. When the stock market opened, Sterling Innovations stock did dip for exactly 7 minutes. Then, following the press conference, it reversed course. Wall Street, it turned out, despised unpredictable narcissists far more than it disliked messy divorces. A CEO who could be so reckless in his personal life was a liability. A new leader, who had just executed a flawless corporate takeover, on the other hand, was a symbol of strength and cunning. By noon, the stock was trading higher than it had been at the close of the previous day. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal maneuvering and corporate restructuring for Amelia. Julian's legal challenges were loud, expensive, and ultimately futile. Each motion his lawyers filed was expertly countered by Clara. With every passing day, his power waned. His allies on the board deserted him. His social circle ostracized him, and his reputation was reduced to a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. Amelia, in contrast, rose. She moved back into the Park Avenue penthouse, but it was a different place. Julian's belongings were professionally packed and sent to storage. His dark, heavy furniture was replaced. She filled the silent spaces not with ghosts, but with a new team, her own executive staff, who often met with her in the large living room. She was rarely alone, yet in the quiet of the night, when the work was done and the city glittered below, she would sit in the nursery. She had designed a soft hand on her belly and allow herself to grieve. She grieved for the young man she had fallen in love with, the brilliant, chaotic partner with whom she had dreamed of conquering the world. She grieved for the family that Leo would never know. The victory was real, the power was hers, but it had come at the cost of the life she had thought was her own. 2 months after the gala, she walked into the CEO's office for the first time as its undisputed occupant. It had been gutted and redesigned to her specifications. The imposing mahogany desk Julian had favored was replaced by a sleek, collaborative table. The wall that once held framed photos of him, shaking hands with world leaders, now featured the company's original charter, the document she had co-written, and a stunning large-scale abstract painting by a female artist. It was an office that looked forward, not back. Arthur Finch knocked on the open door frame. "First quarterly earnings call as the boss," he said, beaming. "Nervous." Amelia turned from the window, a serene smile on her face. "I've been preparing for this for 12 years, Arthur. I'm not nervous. I'm ready." As she walked towards the boardroom, she felt Leo give a strong, decisive kick. It was a jolt of life, a reminder of the real foundation she was building. She had lost a husband, but she had solidified an empire and discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. The world had tried to write her out of her own story, casting her as the tragic, discarded wife. But she had picked up the pen and written a new ending for herself, not one of revenge, but of renaissance. She was Amelia Sterling, CEO, mother architect of her own destiny, and she was just getting some started. Amelia Sterling's story isn't just about a marriage ending. It's about a woman's power being born. She turned a moment of ultimate betrayal into a masterclass in strategy and strength. She didn't just get even. She got everything, and in doing so, created a legacy of empowerment for herself and countless others through her remade foundation. Her story is a powerful reminder that the person you underestimate is often the one holding all the cards. What would you have done in Amelia's position? Could you have shown such incredible composure and strength on the world's biggest stage? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story of justice and resilience moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life dramas. Thank you for listening.